Hey YouTube, this is Carrie, and I had to make a hard video right now, which I was hoping it had never come to this point, but unfortunately it has, so this one's going to be a tough one to talk about. Basically, I'm having to admit that my mind doesn't exactly work like everyone else's, and I think I have an anxiety disorder. So, a lot of people have told me that in my videos I always look strangely depressed and have a hard time seeing what other people see in me. And so, yeah, I'm starting to think that I have generalized anxiety or with some social anxiety mainly. So I thought I'd tell the story. First of all, I always tell stories that are way too long. How I started kind of realizing this. Well, what happened about a month ago, I was playing volleyball with friends. I do this once or twice a week in the middle of the summer. And basically, I am constantly worried about my appearance when I'm playing volleyball. Because when I get sweaty, my hair compresses down against my head, and I'm very anxious about my receded hairline. And the thing is, everybody at volleyball calls me the right pronouns and calls me Carrie. And, like when they're dividing up teams, they're like, do we want 2 girls on this side, or is it okay having 3? And so, they accept me, and they properly gender me. But I'm always so self-conscious because whenever my hair gets flattened down like that, I look in the mirror and I can't see a woman. As soon as it flattens against my head, I feel like it just highlights how thin it is. And because I'm so self-conscious about the angularity of my face, I feel like it highlights it. So I got really, really panicky about looking like a guy. And so I do this a lot. You might have noticed that I've uploaded 7 or 8 presentation check videos, which are basically me trying to reassure myself that I look decent, particularly passable, and that I look like a girl. And so when I got home, I said, you know what? It's time to finally confront these self-hating voices. Let's take a video of what I looked like, and so then the thing is, it's okay, because I know I panic and freak out, and whenever I make a bad video, the image sticks in my head and makes me constantly afraid that I look like that. But the thing is, people at volleyball accept me. So surely, once I take a video, I'll know, well, it doesn't matter if I look bad because they accept me anyway. Big mistake. This is what I ended up looking like. I can show you the video. And after that, I had a complete and total emotional breakdown about how I'll never be a woman, I'll never look like anything but a man, and it doesn't even matter if I get facial feminization surgery and gender reassignment surgery. Look at how ugly my body is, and look at how thick my neck is, and how big my chest cavity is, and I have no boobs, and being around other women is really hard for me, because every single time I look at them, I'm constantly like, I see their femininity and their small body frames and their unchanged voices, which were never destroyed by testosterone, and seeing them makes me constantly afraid that people don't see the same things in me that they see in them. And that triggers my worries that because I can't see those same things in myself, that nobody else can see them. And therefore that to them I'm ugly, to them I'm not really a woman, I'm not passable. And especially I get worried that nobody will ever be able to find me attractive. I'll be honest, I'm very lonely right now. And on the one hand, I don't want to get into a relationship because I'm not comfortable with my genital anatomy, and I can't imagine being comfortable until after gender reassignment surgery, but at the same time, I'm terrified that nobody could ever find me attractive. And, you know, that if I try to date, people will just call me a freak, and especially looking like that in that video, that people tell me that I'm not a woman at all, let alone an attractive one. And that very same night, a coworker had invited me to a party. And this is something that always happens when I'm invited to social events now. I start mentally worrying about so many things that eventually I talk myself out of it. Basically, this was a friend's housewarming party from work, and because I'd been playing volleyball, I started getting anxious about, oh no, well, am I going to look too sweaty? Am I going to look dirty from the sand? I'd have to go home and take a shower, and then I started worrying about, shoot, I don't have anything to wear, you know. Shopping causes me more anxiety than anything else. As soon as I get into the store, I have to fight against mental voices telling me that I don't belong there, that I'm an intruder. And as soon as I try clothes on, they never look good because my body is so misshapen, and it always hits me as a personal insult, and just my mind always runs away with me, and to the point where I can't stand being there anymore, and I can never get out of my comfort zone and try things that other people might try, and I always just end up buying one or two things which are solidly in my comfort zone, usually t-shirts, jeans, shorts. Same thing over and over again. So I started being afraid, you know, the only nice clothes I have are the ones that I wear to work. These are work friends, and somebody actually criticized me at work for always wearing the same thing because I only have 2 outfits that I wear to work. Because again, shopping, I just can't do it. I have to find a way to get through that, but I can't do it. So I started, you know, my only options are either to go in a t-shirt and jeans or a t-shirt and shorts and risk being too casual for a work party, or wear the same damn things that I wear to work every single day and feel like I'm stupid because I only have 2 outfits. And then in addition to that, I started being afraid that, you know, it's a housewarming party. Am I supposed to bring a gift? And that was too much for me to think about because I didn't have time, and I'm terrible at buying gifts because, again, I always start thinking about, is the person not going to like it? You know, oh, shoot, this is a stupid gift. What if everyone else brings this? And, my brain just does not shut up. And then after all of that, I also started worrying that, you know, the host of the party doesn't even like me. This has got to be the dumbest fear of them all, but even though she is my friend on Facebook and invited everybody on her friends list, she tends to be a bit cold to me at work, where, you know, I'll say hello and she's just kind of that sort of face. And so I started being afraid that she doesn't like me, that she doesn't want me there, and this is an irrational fear that I always have, is that because I am trans and because I don't look, quote, normal, that I'd be seen as an intruder, that somehow I spoil the vibe of the party by being there because I'm different. So, are we seeing a problem here? Basically, my mind managed to think me into a depressive rut where I was curled up in bed crying because I hated myself so much, and I talked myself out, and you know, I always criticize myself for having no social life, you know, because I have such a hard time talking with people and getting to know people, and this has been an issue since I was a teenager. And yet I just talked myself out of going to a party where I actually could meet people and talk to people. So a friend kind of had an intervention that very night when I told her that basically, I have internet friends, and, I have a blog, and I had a very public breakdown on that blog where, yet again, I posted the pictures from that awful video and started complaining about myself not being passable, and, my body being unfixable because I wasn't able to transition before puberty, so I'll never be able to undo the male puberty that I went from, and I'll always hate myself for having a larger body frame. And basically, I have this one friend who is always telling me, like criticizing me, saying you've got to get over yourself. And so we started chatting, and she asked me, do you have any friends? Do you ever go out and do anything? Do you have any hobbies aside from sitting in bed and watching movies? How many girls' night outs have you had? And my response was 0, because I don't really have any girlfriends. And again, the problem is mentally I talk myself out of deserving it. I feel like they'd be seeing me as unwelcome, that I don't deserve to be in those groups, And she kind of confronted me on it and said, that's not, and I realized for the first time, this isn't normal thinking. This is defective thinking that other people do not have. And I should have realized this sooner, because other trans people don't have the issues that I have. Usually after a couple years on hormones, once they're passable, which I am, this is the frustrating thing, is that I'm socially accepted, and yet I still cannot get over my own mental demons, where even though I'm passable and accepted, whenever I look at cis girls, I'm still just descending into self-hatred every single time because I can't be them. I'm sorry, this is hard. So I started realizing, my thing, and other people just get over it, and they get past that phase where they're worried about what others think of them. And once they're passable and socially accepted, they go out and actually live their life and have a relatively normal level of functioning. Where I'm honestly still just as bad off as I ever was. I barely have any friends. I have a hard time talking to people and getting to know them. I'm happy and upbeat and generally well liked, but I don't have any close friends because I have such a hard time opening up to people and just feeling like I deserve to be their friends. Again, there's always that worry in the back of my head that nobody really likes me. They're just humoring me. That I'm a special snowflake that everyone has to, go out of their way in order to accept. And, I'm worried they're only calling me female pronouns and by my name because they pity me. And again, I kind of had to start realizing that this is not normal. So I actually finally did talk to my therapist about this, and for the first time I said, I think I have an anxiety disorder. I think this has reached the point where this isn't normal. It's just my brain is unable to stop worrying and unable to take even the smallest differences between me and cis women and the smallest differences between me and what I deem normal people and turn them into something that makes me feel like I have no worth as a human being and have mental breakdowns. And this is what I believe makes the disorder, is that it actually affects my life in a concrete manner where I'm not attending social events because of it. I'm talking myself out of them, and I have these awful emotional breakdowns where I end up in bed crying, gasping for air. Last night I had an awful breakdown, same thing, and what triggered that one was basically watching a very beautiful, passable trans women talk about her dating issues. And guys were commenting, but how can you be trans? You're so beautiful. And I'm like, so what does that mean for those of us that do look trans? Are we ugly? Or we unlovable, you know? And just bring up those same anxieties that nobody will ever be able to love me or find me attractive. And this is really fresh in my head. That's why I'm goddamn crying again. And I ended up in bed hitting myself on the head, and I have problems, god damn it. I don't have solutions this time. This video is basically just to say, you know, I made videos specifically because I was hoping that eventually I would reach a point where I was past this, and I kind of wanted to be an inspiration to people where once I reached the end point of transition and I would finally be over my problems and all those social issues that I've had my whole life, I'd finally be over them. But I guess the reality is this is just a mental disorder that no matter how long I'm full-time, no matter how passable I am, no matter how many compliments I get, and this is the frustrating part, no matter how I try to think myself out of it by somehow proving to myself that I'm not all of those anxious, self-doubting thoughts that I constantly have going through my head, that I'm never going to be able to disprove myself from them. And it's not because I need to disprove them, it's just because they're defective thinking. The problem isn't that I worry about them, it's that I worry about them to the point that over and over and over again, they're negatively affecting the quality of my life. And that I'm always taking those fears, and instead of just, you know, reassuring, I can't reassure myself that they're just my mind running away with me. Because my mind, even when I tell myself, no, this isn't what you look like. Remember this good video? That's what you look like. My mind will always keep worrying that I'm wrong, that I do look like those worst videos that I've ever taken, and that it's always just worrying about worst case scenarios. So, and the reason why I'm making this video is because anxiety is a huge issue that a lot of trans people face. I think I read a study a while ago that said 55% of trans people, trans women in particular, have some form of either social anxiety disorder or generalized anxiety. And ultimately, I guess, and the thing is, I wasn't like this as a kid. I was actually popular. And, you know, at my 9th birthday party, I was begging my mom to let me invite more people because I had so many friends and so many people that I wanted to invite. And then my teenage years started happening. And suddenly, me being friends with girls wasn't okay anymore. And me being a bit effeminate wasn't okay anymore. I started getting teased for being gay. I still kept wearing the short shorts that I wore as a kid and still kept acting gender non-conforming, and I got teased and tormented for it. I had things stolen from me. People would steal my belt and play keep away with it because they thought it was funny that I was so weak that I couldn't fight back. And it just was a bad time for me. I got physically abused by my peers. I got beaten up a few times, and I was just constantly teased. And I even remember when this started. That was the first time that I started going to a party and being afraid that I was unwelcome because I was different. And again, it happens. I just saw a lecture from Dr. Robert Sapolsky on how depression and anxiety develops, and basically it comes from a feeling of a loss of control, where usually people go through and I can see this pattern, where people go through one or two major stressors and they fall into a bit of a depression where they doubt themselves, but then they bounce back from it. But after 5 or 6 of these repeated things happening, which causes someone to, fall down into depression, eventually something clicks. And the chemistry of the brain changes to where the mind loses the ability to feel control. And depression and anxiety are basically what he says, hostility turned inward. And I can definitely attest it's self-hatred and excessive worry that my own self-hating voices are what other people are thinking about me. So, and I went through a lot of stressors when I was a teenager. My parents divorced at age 13. I moved from small town Cambridge, Ohio, population 10,000, to giant big city Tampa, Florida, population 300,000, and I lost all of my friends, and in that same year I failed classes in school for the first time, and my identity when I was a kid was the smart kid, so that not only felt bad because I felt like I was letting my parents down, it felt like a blow to my entire self-worth. I didn't know who I was anymore. And then dysphoria hit me, because at age 13 I started going through puberty, and for the first time I started hating my own body. And, I was a soprano singer in the Tampa Bay Children's Chorus, and that was like my entire identity. And then all of a sudden my voice changed, and I felt like I'd lost who I was on a fundamental level. So, I was experiencing dysphoria, I missed my dad, I missed my old friends, I was failing in school, and all of this just hit me all at the same time. So, I guess it's no wonder why I'm so fucked up. And it was just a bunch of bad circumstances all happening at once, which I do believe triggered a fundamental change in my brain chemistry. And it's also genetic. A lot of people on my dad's side of the family also deal with depression issues, so I guess it's no surprise that I do too. And unfortunately this isn't an answer video. I've talked to my therapist about it once, and she honestly hasn't been much help, because she told me, well, I'm reluctant you're showing exactly the same symptoms that somebody with depression and anxiety shows, but I'm reluctant to say that you officially have it, because the thing is, people with depression and anxiety are worried about nothing. You are worried about one very particular thing, and that is looking like a man and being rejected because of your identity. So she still thinks that it might be a trans issue, where I'm starting to believe that it's beyond that point. But, I'm actually going to go to another therapist and get a second opinion. And the point is, this has gone on way too long. A lot of people struggle with issues in early transition and mid-transition when they're still struggling with being unpassable and still struggling with social rejection and family issues and coming out issues and work issues, where I'm long past that point. The sad thing about this is, remember my last video where I talked about family rejection? I was wrong. My dad accepts me. I finally saw him for the first time in 2.5 years, and shockingly, he called me his daughter, he called me Carrie, he introduced me to everybody that way, and he didn't criticize me even once, and it was just the same as it had always been. And this was after like a year straight of fighting myself and having conversations with myself in his voice, where, in his voice, I'd be telling myself that I'm ugly and that you'll never really be a woman, and I'd like be responding to Dad by saying, well, Dad, do you think I want to look this way? It's not. And I was arguing with myself for a year straight. And when I actually saw him, not a single one of those conversations that I was preparing myself for and beating myself up for came to pass. So I know I make videos about doubting myself, and I know a lot of people have related to them. Don't. I have issues, and it's not something that's due to being trans. It's due to having an anxiety disorder. If anybody is feeling the same things that I'm feeling, constantly worried about passing, still not able to accept yourself, even though you get all the external validation in the world, excluding yourself from social spaces because you feel like you don't belong there and are constantly worried about people judging you, all I can say is don't take my videos as solace that it's common. It's not normal. Seek professional help. I still am, and I'm trying to get over this, and that is why I have not made videos for so long, is because I really don't know how much help I can be to the trans community with all the issues that I now know that I have. So yeah, that's my video. Anxiety is common. Talk to a therapist. They can help, at least, you know, if they're experienced. It's difficult because whatever. Bye.